My name is Robert Hastings, and I was born on March 2nd, 1958, in a small town just outside of Des Moines, Iowa. At 67 years old, I've spent 40 years as a civil engineer, designing bridges and highways that communities depend on. My wife, Linda, and I raised 2 daughters, both now grown with families of their own. For as long as I can remember, I've believed that hard work, prudent planning, and a steadfast faith in God would secure our future. I attended church every Sunday, studied scripture nightly, and often quoted Proverbs. The wise lay up knowledge, but the mouth of a fool brings ruin. I trusted that honoring God and saving diligently would protect my family against any storm. On June 14, 2025, at precisely 9:18 a.m., my world shifted. I was at my desk in Washington, D.C., reviewing a thick packet labeled Congressional Retirement Reform Proposal, when I felt a cold chill run through my spine. The memo outlined sweeping cuts to Social Security and pension protections. As I scanned the language, phrases like means test, eligibility cap, and delayed retirement age, my heart thundered. I leaned closer, pinching the edge of the page, and realized that everything my generation had counted on was in peril. I rushed into the marble corridor, gripping the memo like a lifeline. Memories flooded me of my father, who died waiting for his pension, and neighbors who scrimped and saved, trusting their golden years would be safe. Panic rose until it felt impossible to draw breath. The ornate ceiling lights flickered overhead as I staggered back toward my office. Before I could steady myself, the floor gave way. My foot slid on polished stone, and I felt the ancient bone in my ankle snap like a dry twig. A searing pain shot upward as the world spun. The last thing I heard was my own ragged inhalation, punctuated by a sickening crack, then oblivion. Every Saturday, Linda and I rose before dawn to fish on the Des Moines River, grateful for simple joys. I taught Sunday school for decades, preaching stewardship and planning. I balanced family budgets carefully, storing every extra dollar in retirement accounts, convinced markets and prayers would see us through. Always did I awoke to a roar of wind and the oppressive weight of molten rock beneath me. My senses flared. Every inch of my skin felt as though it were smoldering, yet I could not tell if the heat was real or a whisper in my mind. I opened my eyes and discovered I was lying on a jagged expanse of black volcanic glass, shards of obsidian jutting up around me like broken promises. The sky above was a sickly red-black swirl, streaked with veins of glowing ember that pulsed in time with my own ragged heartbeat. As I struggled upright, sulphurous smoke curled around my ankles, and a rancid stench of rot and brimstone assaulted my nostrils. Each breath burned. The ground trembled beneath my boots, as if the very earth were alive and angry. In the distance, I glimpsed rivers of lava carving glowing canyons through the rock, their surfaces shimmering like blood under strobe lights. Above one such river, an arched bridge of fractured stone spanned the chasm, a grotesque monument to ruin, every broken column and cracked balustrade etched with runes I could not decipher. I took a hesitant step forward. The air around me crackled, and fires leapt spontaneously along the rocky walls, illuminating creatures hunched in the shadows. I glimpsed forms with too many limbs, their tortured shapes shifting like smoke. Wails echoed off the cavern walls, high-pitched and discordant, piercing my mind with sorrow. Every face I saw twisted in agony, their mouths pulled wide in silent screams. I felt tears stream down my cheeks, though the fires should have evaporated every drop. My gaze wandered to the horizon, where jagged spires of black stone stabbed at the roiling sky, each crowned by furnace-bright crucibles that seemed to boil with someone's unspoken sins. Between these towers, swirling vortexes of flame and ash churned like malevolent whirlpools, portals consuming anything foolish enough to draw near. I imagined every promise I had ever made and broken being drawn into those infernal gates, reduced to cinder and regret. Yet even here, in this realm of eternal torment, there was shape and order. Pathways of cracked marble led between the bridges and spires, winding like serpents through the heat. Occasionally, I spotted gargantuan iron gates, each flanked by statues of angels whose wings had been crushed, faces melted away, remnants of hope turned to horror. Their once majestic forms now stood as silent sentinels, warning any who passed that judgment reigned supreme. My heart pounded. I willed myself forward, driven by equal parts dread and terrible fascination. With every step, the sulphur smoke thickened, stinging my eyes and constricting my chest. The ground beneath my feet cracked, sending puffs of noxious steam into the air. In the distance, I heard the clang of heavy metal, chains dragged across stone, though I could not see their source. A distant chorus of tortured voices rose and fell, chanting names I could not place, a dirge for souls too far gone to pray. I paused at the edge of a wide plateau, where the lava river split into 3 channels. Across the chasm stood a colossal throne hewn from obsidian, its surface slick with molten tears. I felt inexplicably drawn to it, as though some part of me knew that what sat upon it would reveal why I had been brought here. The ember glow reflected off the throne's arms, each carved into the shape of skeletal hands gripping the seats of power, an echo of every time I had believed human authority would protect me. As I took a final step onto the plateau, the very air shimmered, and a low rumble echoed through the sky. The fires around me flared, illuminating symbols painted in ash across the ground. Broken clocks, wilted oaks, and overturned scales of justice. They spoke of time's betrayal, nature's withering, the collapse of balance. My blood ran cold as the realization dawned. This was no random hellscape, but a cosmos built from human failings, a mirror reflecting every fracture in our social covenant. A surge of terror clawed at my mind. I could almost taste the bitter tang of regret on my tongue. In that moment, I understood that here, in this dark and hell-like realm, every lie ever told in the halls of power, every promise broken at the altar of security, had come to rest. And if I lingered, my own missteps, the choices I thought minor, the trust one placed in systems I believed infallible, would be torn apart and displayed like trophies of shame. My legs shook, but I forced myself to move forward, drawn toward the throne, toward whatever revelation awaited. For somewhere beyond the dancing flames and echoing cries lay the truth of why I had been summoned into this place. Why Congress and the White House's machinations had set this journey into motion, and what I must carry back once I escaped these terrible gates. My feet slipped on fractured basalt as I plunged deeper into that infernal realm. The molten rivers felt like blood beneath my boots, their heat reaching through the soles. With each step, the obsidian floor cracked, hissing steam that smelled of charred bone. The sky's ember glow dimmed, swallowed by layers of smothering ash that clung to my lungs. I stumbled down a winding corridor carved from black stone. Along the walls, faces etched into the rock contorted in silent agony. I recognized a few souls, old classmates, colleagues from government committees I had once respected, now trapped in stone prisons of their own making. Their eyes met mine, hollow and desperate, begging for mercy I could not grant. At the corridor's end, a yawning pit split the ground. Chains of fire snaked around its rim, dragging souls screaming into its center. I heard the frantic gasp of my own name carried on the wind, and realized those chains bore my imprint. The choices I had ignored, the warnings I had silenced, the faith I had traded for comfort. A ledge arched over the pit. I heard distant clanks and saw shadows torn apart by unseen torturers. My heart pounded as I pressed forward, the ground trembling beneath. Each step was an admission of guilt, a confession written in the scorch marks on the stones. Then I fell. The ledge crumbled, sending me tumbling into darkness. I braced for impact but felt only weightless descent, as if the air itself had opened to swallow me whole. Around me, the voices merged into a single chorus of despair. My skin prickled as I surrendered to the plunge, knowing this journey had only just begun. I stumbled onto a vast, cracked plaza of black stone, the molten rivers behind me casting an angry red glow across every surface. Before me stood a circle of grotesque pedestals, each supporting a bound figure writhing in agony. As I approached, the flames split into 12 pillars of fire, forming a cage around them. My breath caught when I recognized one pedestal's victim, Senator Mark Phillips, the very man whose vote had sealed the initial retirement cuts. His face twisted in pain as molten chains bound his wrists, the heat biting into his flesh, but his eyes locked onto mine with a glare of accusing fury. I forced my body forward, drawn by a need to understand. On the next pedestal was Grace, my longtime administrative assistant, her faith in my leadership shattered by every delay in pension funding. I remembered trusting her to manage my files, never imagining her disappointment would haunt me here in this place. She moaned my name, and in that moment I felt the sting of every promise I'd broken, every email I'd ignored, every plea for clarity I'd cast aside. A sudden blast of wind carried whispers around me, snippets of conversations I thought buried. "They'll be fine. We can revisit this next term. Just trust the process." The voices coalesced into a chorus of betrayal. I realized those words were my own. My throat tightened as the flames flickered, revealing new figures emerging from the shadows. There was Professor Elaine Rivers, who had warned in committee hearings of the poverty trap these policies would create. I had dismissed her as alarmist. Now she writhed atop her pedestal, her brilliant mind silenced by molten iron that dripped from her feet into a pool of tears. Her expression was not of pain but sorrow. Sorrow that I had joined the chorus of skeptics instead of heeding her mathematical warnings. Behind me, chains rattled and a rough hand gripped my shoulder. I whirled around to find a figure I knew all too well. My own reflection, cloaked in darkness, eyes glowing red. Its lips parted in a grin of contempt as it whispered, "You made this." My knees buckled as I realized I was both victim and perpetrator. The same hands that had penned the memos now trembled as they fed the flames that tortured these people. Suddenly the ground beneath the circle cracked open, revealing a pit of writhing souls below. Their faces were familiar too. Family friends who relied on social security, neighbors whose savings evaporated under economic strain. Their cries poured upward like bitter rain, each name a reminder of trust betrayed. I sank to my knees, tears mingling with the ash at my feet. The firelight danced over my bowed head as guilt crushed me. Guilt for turning a blind eye, for sacrificing the vulnerable on the altar of political expediency, for believing that systems built by flawed humans could never fail. Every hope I had clung to, the hope of security, of justice, of simple decency, lay shattered like broken glass beneath my trembling palms. In that pitiless moment, I understood that without repentance there could be no escape. All my defenses dissolved in the hellish glow as I faced the raw truth. My obedience to power had forged these chains, and only by confronting that darkness could I ever hope to return to the world I had forsaken. A sudden hush fell over that infernal plaza, a silence so profound it swallowed the crackling of flames. Before me, the pillars of fire dimmed as a brilliant white light pierced the darkness. I shielded my eyes, heart hammering, as a figure emerged from the glow. His robes seemed woven from pure radiance, edges dissolving into halos of mercy. Though the heat still licked the air, I felt a cooling breeze brush my skin, carrying voices of comfort and compassion. "Robert," he spoke, and his voice resonated through my bones like a bomb. Every syllable carried forgiveness, stronger than any judgment I'd felt in this place. I fell forward on my hands and knees, tears streaming down my scorched cheeks. The light expanded, cascading over the tormented souls on their pedestals. Chains of molten iron shattered into dust. Their screams eased into whispers of awe. I watched as the senator's fury softened, as Grace's anguish loosened its grip, as Professor Rivers raised tear-filled eyes toward the heavens. Christ knelt beside me, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder. In that touch, I sensed every promise I'd betrayed being forgiven, and every doubt I'd swallowed being replaced with hope. The weight of guilt lifted, yet I did not feel unworthy. Instead, I felt called to bear witness, called to stand against the darkness that once blinded me. The light pulsed once more, then receded into the sky like dawn-banishing night. Where fire and ash had reigned, the obsidian stones lay cool and still. I rose, heart alight with purpose. In that luminous moment, I understood that divine grace could reshape even the hardest of hearts, and that my testimony in the world above would begin with the mercy I received here, that I came to in a sterile room filled with the rhythmic beeping of a heart monitor and the soft hiss of oxygen flowing through a tube at my nose. My eyes fluttered open to bright fluorescent lights, and the pale face of a nurse hovering over me. For a moment, I thought I was dreaming, until I felt the weight of bruises and bandages, the phantom sting of heat that hadn't been there before. Fear gripped me as memories of the hellscape rushed back. Molten chains, accusing faces, the blinding light of forgiveness. I struggled to sit up, sweat cooling on my forehead. A doctor entered, spoke in measured tones about fractured bones and a concussion. He mentioned critical condition and a narrow escape. But his words were muffled behind the roar of revelations, still playing in my mind. I closed my eyes and saw the senator's pleading glare, felt Grace's shattered trust, heard Professor Rivers's sorrowful cry. Then I remembered the figure of Christ, his hand on my shoulder, his forgiveness pouring into my soul like living water. Tears welled as I confronted the paradox. I had returned to life, but the world I awoke to was the same one I had condemned in that infernal vision. The congressional proposal still loomed, the White House rhetoric still marched forward, and millions of retirees were in jeopardy just as before. My heart ached with a new urgency. Should I cling to the comfort of routines? Church on Sundays, careful savings, polite optimism, or heed the divine call that pulsed within me now? My old beliefs, faith in systems and human authority, felt hollow. Yet I feared the cost of speaking out, ridicule, political attack, the scorn of colleagues. In the distance, I heard Linda's prayer for my recovery. I thought of my daughters and the legacy I wanted to leave them. And in that quiet hospital room, between the sterile walls and the hum of machines, I resolved that my survival was no accident. I had been shown a path, a dangerous, uncharted path, to confront injustice, warn the vulnerable, and unite my broken faith with unwavering action. My awakening had begun, and I would no longer turn away, did I end the days following my discharge. I submerged myself in the fine print of the congressional proposal. Every phrase, revised benefit threshold, indexed eligibility, sustainability reserve, felt like a tempest gathering force against our retirements. I reached out to Grace and a handful of retired colleagues. Together, we formed a grassroots coalition, blending engineers, nurses, and educators determined to expose the human toll. We drafted petitions, compiled stories of families on fixed incomes, and plotted a virtual town hall to broadcast our warnings. Each evening, I convened with Professor Rivers over video calls. She refined her predictive models to quantify the number of seniors at risk. I distilled those findings into clear, urgent talking points. I wrote op-eds for local newspapers, cited my own near-death ordeal as proof of what's at stake, and enlisted church small groups to pray and mobilize. I contacted former classmates in Congress, reminding them of their solemn duty to protect citizens, not punish them. We planned rallies at town squares, coordinated social media campaigns under the hashtag #SecureOurGoldenYears, and solicited endorsements from community leaders. Fueled by the memory of hell's flames and Christ's mercy, my mission crystallized. To stand as a living warning in the halls of power, to transform personal terror into collective action, and to ensure that no retiree faces the abyss alone. When I returned home, Linda welcomed me with a trembling embrace, as though I were both the man she loved and the stranger who'd faced the fires of judgment. The congressional memo still lay on my desk, its words now a rallying cry rather than a sentence of despair. I published my full testimony online, 2,200 words detailing every moment from the marble halls of power to the molten rivers of hell. Within days, it went viral among seniors' advocacy groups, faith communities, and local media. Email inboxes flooded with stories. Retirees afraid to buy groceries, veterans worrying about every medical bill, widows counting pennies for prescriptions. Their voices became my mission statement. Together, we pressured congressional offices with petitions and phone calls. Local pastors cited my story in sermons, urging congregations to demand compassion from their representatives. Town hall after town hall, faces once cast in doubt now listened with urgency, some with tears, many nodding in solidarity. I organized a modest rally on the Capitol steps, where Grace, Professor Rivers, and dozens of retirees stood behind me as I spoke of mercy and justice. Principles older than any policy, deeper than any budget. Cameras rolled as I recounted Christ's light piercing the darkest realms and challenged lawmakers. Will you protect your people, or condemn them to a slow, living hell? In the weeks that followed, the proposal was amended, benefit reductions softened, eligibility adjusted, oversight committees established. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. More importantly, a movement had awakened. Now, as I walk each morning along the Des Moines River, I carry two tokens: my weathered Bible and the printed copy of that congressional memo, reminders of a journey from fear to faith, from silence to advocacy. My life's work has taken a new form: to be a shepherd for those left vulnerable, to transform dread into determination, and to walk forward in grace. This is my new beginning.